During my stepson Daniel's promotion ceremony, my 8-year-old daughter squeezed my hand so hard that her nails dug into my palm. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling, "can we leave?" I looked down at her in surprise and asked why, but she only shook her head and stared across the room, past the pressed uniforms, polished shoes, proud relatives, and the American flag above the stage. Her face had gone pale. That was the first moment I knew something was wrong, though it was not until we were sitting in the car 30 minutes later that she whispered the words that turned my blood cold. "Mom, you didn't see what Grandma did you?" My name is Claire Whitaker. I was 32, married to Robert, and stepmother to his 26-year-old son, Daniel, who had just earned one of the biggest honors of his young Army career. Daniel was tall, serious, and proud in the way young soldiers often are when trying to prove they belong among older men. He was never exactly cruel to me, but he had never called me family either. To him, I was the woman his father married after his mother died, and Robert's mother, Evelyn, made sure everyone remembered it. Evelyn Whitaker could smile at you in church while cutting you open with a single sentence. She wore pearls to breakfast, never raised her voice, and acted as though grief gave her permission to rule everyone around her. From the day Robert introduced me, she looked at me as if I had stolen a place at a table where I did not belong. At our first meeting, she noticed the small service pin on my blouse and asked whether I had been in the Army. When I said yes, she gave a tiny laugh and replied, "Well, I suppose everybody needs a chapter." That was Evelyn. Sweet as iced tea on the surface and bitter underneath. I had served 6 years as an Army logistics officer before a convoy accident overseas ended that part of my life. I came home with a limp that returned in cold weather, a folder full of medical and service records, and a small blue velvet case I rarely opened. Inside was my Bronze Star. I did not brag about it or display it around the house, but on the morning of Daniel's ceremony, Robert asked me to bring it. He thought it might mean something to Daniel to see that I had served too. I wanted to believe him, so I placed the case inside a zipped compartment of my purse and drove to the ceremony with Lily in the back seat, humming along to an old country song. Daniel's promotion mattered to Robert in a way I understood even before he said it aloud. Since Daniel's mother died, father and son had built much of their relationship around duty, endurance, and the things neither of them knew how to discuss directly. Robert wanted that day to feel whole. I wanted the same thing, even if my place in the photographs was always uncertain. Bringing the medal felt like a small bridge between Daniel's life and mine, a quiet way of saying that I understood the weight of service without asking him to see me as a replacement for anyone. Evelyn was already there when we arrived. She kissed Robert's cheek, hugged Daniel, then glanced at Lily and me. "Oh," she said, "you came." I held my smile and told her we would not have missed it. For the first half of the ceremony, everything looked beautiful. The flags were perfectly arranged, the uniforms immaculate, and the room carried the quiet pride that belongs to military ceremonies. Daniel stood straight and composed, but I could see the satisfaction in his face when his name was called. Even Evelyn dabbed her eyes with a folded tissue. Then Lily squeezed my hand and asked to leave. I should have listened, but I whispered that it would only be a few more minutes. Across the aisle, Evelyn smiled as though she had already won. No one noticed Lily's fear. The ceremony continued into handshakes, photographs, and congratulations. Officers greeted Daniel while families gathered beneath the flag for pictures they would later frame. I kept looking down at Lily. Normally, she loved military ceremonies, admired the uniforms, and saluted anyone with stars on their shoulders. That day, she would not even look up. During the reception, Lily stayed close enough that I could feel her shoulder against my hip. She refused a cookie, which was unlike her, and kept checking the room as if she expected someone to approach us. I followed her gaze several times but saw only smiling officers, proud parents, and Evelyn moving through the crowd with perfect composure. Every surface detail told me the afternoon was safe. Only my daughter's grip said otherwise. I knelt and asked whether she felt sick, or whether someone had said something to her. She shook her head both times. Before I could ask again, Robert called us over for the family picture. Daniel stood in the center, with his new rank shining under the lights. Robert put an arm around his son, and Evelyn quickly took the place on Daniel's other side. When the photographer invited me to step in, Evelyn said brightly that I could stand with Lily at the end because it would look more natural. It was such an innocent word, yet she used words like that to make me feel like a guest in my own family. I said nothing. I had learned that not every insult deserved an answer. After the photographs, people moved into the reception hall for coffee, sandwiches, cookies, and cake. Robert stayed busy introducing Daniel to retired officers. I watched father and son laughing and felt genuinely happy for them, while also wondering whether either had noticed that Lily had not smiled all afternoon. When it was time to leave, Robert walked us to the parking lot and said Daniel wanted him to stay another hour. He kissed my forehead and asked Lily whether everything was all right. She forced a tiny nod, and he accepted it without question. As he returned to the building, I looked through the glass entrance doors and saw Evelyn watching us. She was not talking to anyone. The moment our eyes met, she smiled. It was not warm or proud. It was the satisfied smile of someone who believed a game was already over. The drive home was unusually quiet. Lily normally filled every trip with questions, but she stared out the window and hugged her backpack to her chest. I turned off the radio and told her she had scared me, then promised she would not be in trouble if she told me what was wrong. She still said nothing. When we reached the driveway, I shut off the engine, and neither of us moved. Finally, she turned toward me with tears in her eyes and asked whether I had seen what Grandma did. When I asked what she meant, she glanced toward the house to make sure we were alone, then whispered, "I saw Grandma open your purse." She said that during the applause for Daniel, Evelyn picked it up. Lily had watched because she thought Grandma might be looking for tissues, but instead, Evelyn opened the small zipped compartment, removed my blue velvet box, looked around, and put it in her own purse. I felt the blood drain from my face. I asked whether Evelyn had seen her watching. Lily nodded. She looked right at me. Then she smiled and put her finger over her lips. My daughter raised one tiny finger to her mouth. Evelyn had silently ordered an 8-year-old child to keep her secret. For a moment, my mind searched for innocent explanations. Maybe Evelyn had mistaken the case for something else. Maybe she had moved it or intended to return it. But she had never shown the slightest interest in my military service. There was no reasonable reason for her to touch it. What frightened me most was not only that Evelyn had taken something valuable, it was the deliberate sequence Lily described, waiting for applause, checking who was watching, opening the exact compartment, hiding the case, then silencing the only witness with a smile. None of that sounded accidental. It sounded planned. Yet I knew that the moment I said that aloud, Robert would hear an attack on his mother rather than concern for his daughter and me. So I held the anger in place and concentrated on what could be proved. Inside the house, I set my purse on the kitchen counter and opened it with shaking hands. My wallet, keys, charger, notebook, lip balm, pens, and receipts were all there. The blue case was not. I searched every pocket twice, then emptied the purse onto the counter until receipts covered the granite and pens rolled onto the floor. The bronze star was gone. Lily stood nearby and apologized. I pulled her into my arms and told her she had done nothing wrong. She admitted she had been afraid Grandma would be angry if she told me. I kissed the top of her head and said I was proud of her. That evening, Robert came home carrying Daniel's favorite chocolate cake. He stopped smiling when he saw my face. I told him the bronze star was missing, and Lily quietly said she had seen Grandma take it. Robert looked from her to me, sighed, and reminded me that Lily was only 8. "Children misunderstood things," he said. Lily insisted she knew what she had seen, but Robert knelt beside her and told her Grandma loved her and would never steal. When he stood, he suggested the metal might have fallen out or that I might have left it at home. I reminded him that it had been in a zipped compartment and that I had packed it myself. He rubbed his forehead and asked me not to accuse his mother without proof. There it was again, his instinct to protect Evelyn first. I did not argue, not because I believed him, but because I understood something. If Evelyn had taken my medal, she had done it believing no one would question her. People who believe they will never be questioned often become careless, and I intended to find her mistake. The next morning, I called the Fort Harrison Community Center where the ceremony had been held. A woman named Melissa confirmed that security cameras and the media team had recorded the event, but family members could not access the footage directly. She gave me the number for public affairs. An officer there explained that the official video focused mainly on the stage, though he agreed to review it. Captain Lewis called later that afternoon. The audience was not clearly visible, but there was one moment when Evelyn appeared to be holding a handbag. He could not confirm that it was mine or determine what she was doing. It was not enough. After the call, doubt crept in for the first time. What if Robert was right? What if Lily had misunderstood? Then the doorbell rang. A gray-haired volunteer from the ceremony introduced himself as Harold Benson. He had heard someone was asking questions and remembered seeing Evelyn. During the ceremony, she had asked him for directions to the ladies' room while carrying my purse. Harold had assumed I asked her to hold it and jokingly said, "Ma'am, your daughter forgot her purse." Evelyn corrected him immediately. "She's not my daughter." Harold remembered the remark because it seemed so strange. His visit did not prove she stole the medal, but it proved she had my purse at exactly the time Lily said she did, and exactly when the medal disappeared. I was no longer relying only on a child's frightened memory. I was following facts. That night, after Lily was asleep, I brought down an old storage box filled with items too important to throw away and too painful to examine often. Robert watched as I removed an army binder, photo albums, and stacks of service records. Then I realized an entire folder was missing. I checked the box, the bookshelf, and my desk before admitting it was gone. The missing deployment file had been stored with the medal. Behind an old photograph of me standing beside a convoy in Kuwait should have been copies of my deployment orders, the recommendation for my Bronze Star, witness statements, and a handwritten letter from the battalion commander who nominated me. Every page was gone. Robert's expression changed. A medal could be misplaced, borrowed, or lost. Military records were different. He asked why anyone would take them, and I told him that was exactly what I intended to find out. I also kept thinking about the paperwork. The medal itself could have been recognized by anyone familiar with military awards, but the accompanying documents established where it came from, why it was awarded, and who had earned it. Taking both meant Evelyn either understood their connection or had taken enough time inside our home to learn it. That possibility forced me to reconsider every visit, every moment she had been alone near our closets or study, and every dismissive remark she had made about my service. The next morning, I visited the County Veterans Resource Center and spoke with Carol, an older Marine veteran who remembered me. She explained that most of my official records had been digitized and could be replaced, but the handwritten recommendation letter had never been part of my personnel file. My commander had written it personally, and only one original existed. Carol handed me forms for certified copies and reminded me that the papers told part of my story but were not my service. I knew she was right. No one could erase what I had done, yet someone had tried to erase the proof. By the time I drove home, I was no longer thinking about a stolen keepsake. I was thinking about intent. Someone wanted to rewrite my history, and that frightened me far more than the theft itself. I waited 3 days before speaking to Evelyn because I wanted facts, not emotion, to guide the conversation. Robert drove with me to her house, repeating that we should not turn the situation into something it was not. He admitted his mother had always been difficult and stubborn, but stubborn people refused to change restaurants or insisted on paper maps. Evelyn had spent 6 years reminding me I could never replace Daniel's mother. That was not stubbornness. It was a choice. Her White House looked perfect, with trimmed flower beds, a swept porch, and an American flag beside the steps. A stranger would have assumed a sweet grandmother lived there. In many ways, one did. Evelyn volunteered at church, baked pies for veterans fundraisers, and remembered birthdays. She also knew how to wound someone without raising her voice. She hugged Robert, gave me a polite nod, and served coffee. After several minutes of talk about Daniel, neighbors, church, and the weather, I told her my Bronze Star had disappeared at the ceremony. She expressed mild sympathy and said she hoped I found it. I replied that Lily had seen someone take it and specifically described Evelyn opening my purse. For 1 second, Evelyn's smile vanished. Then she called children imaginative and said I had always wanted a reason to make her the villain. I reminded her that I had spent 6 years avoiding conflict, but she only folded her hands and said, "And yet here we are." As we left, she spoke quietly enough that only I could hear. "Do you know why Daniel never truly accepted you? Because I made sure he never forgot who his real mother was." Then she smiled and closed the door. Robert and I drove in silence for nearly 10 minutes. Finally, he admitted he should have noticed years earlier. That evening, while searching old family papers, I found a Christmas card Daniel wrote when he was 16. I remembered the first line. "Thank you for never trying to replace my mom." I had forgotten the smaller sentence beneath it. "Grandma says I shouldn't trust you, but I think she's wrong." I read it 3 times. Evelyn's campaign against me had begun the day I entered the family. For 6 years, I believed Daniel and I had simply learned to coexist. We shared holidays, repaired a fence together, and laughed over Robert's old fishing stories. Now I wondered how many chances for a real relationship had been destroyed before they could grow. The Christmas card changed the way I remembered years of small interactions. Daniel's distance had often seemed natural for a grieving teenager trying to protect his mother's memory. Now I saw another influence running beneath it. Evelyn had not merely preserved her daughter's place. She had taught Daniel that accepting me would betray his mother. She had turned love into a loyalty test, and I had spent years blaming myself for failing one whose rules were hidden from me. The following Monday, a retired officer named Colonel James Hollister called. He had attended Daniel's ceremony and had been debating whether what he saw mattered. During the applause, he watched Evelyn step away from her seat and walk behind the last row, where almost no one was looking. She removed something from a handbag. He could not see every detail, but he distinctly remembered a small blue velvet case. Then he told me she had handed it to another woman. He later heard that woman introduce herself as Margaret Sloan, and an officer beside him identified her as a military memorabilia dealer from Indianapolis. After thanking him, I searched Margaret's name. She owned Sloan Military Collectibles and specialized in medals, campaign decorations, military documents, and estate collections. Exactly the kind of material missing from my home. This was no longer a family misunderstanding. Evelyn had carried my medal and papers to someone whose business involved buying and selling military history. I did not yet know whether she wanted money or something more personal, but someone had tried to place a price on my past. I did not call Evelyn, the police, or Margaret. 6 years in the army taught me that when someone is hiding the truth, you do not announce that you are looking for it. You let them believe they are safe. The next morning, I contacted Rebecca Morgan, a former Army JAG officer who specialized in military fraud and civil litigation. After listening for nearly an hour, she asked whether I wanted revenge or the truth. I admitted I wanted both. She said most people did, but only one usually led to peace. Rebecca advised me not to confront anyone. If Evelyn had transferred the medal and papers, warning her would give her time to destroy evidence. We would let her believe I had no proof while we investigated quietly. Within 48 hours, Rebecca learned that Margaret Sloan regularly authenticated military awards for museums, estate sales, auctions, and private collectors. She kept meticulous records. If my bronze star had crossed her desk, there was likely paperwork. As Rebecca put it, legitimate businesses document everything, and dishonest customers often forget that. Rebecca also warned me to separate what I suspected from what the evidence could establish. Lily's account showed the theft. Harold placed the purse in Evelyn's hands. Colonel Hollister saw the blue case move behind the final row. Margaret could establish why the items were brought to her shop. No single witness had the entire story, but together, they formed a chain. The strength was in the sequence, not in one dramatic piece of proof. 3 days later, Rebecca called with an answer. Margaret remembered the medal clearly. Evelyn had not sold it. She had brought the bronze star and supporting records to the shop for an appraisal and asked what they might be worth. Margaret refused because Evelyn could not prove ownership. So Evelyn left with everything. Relief washed over me because the medal still existed somewhere, but the reason for the visit made me sick. Evelyn had asked a stranger to put a dollar value on my service. Rebecca asked Margaret not to contact her. As far as Evelyn knew, Lily had been dismissed. Robert still doubted me, and I was quietly grieving a lost keepsake. She had no idea that Lily, Harold, Colonel Hollister, Margaret, and Rebecca had become pieces of the same puzzle. That weekend, Daniel invited the family to dinner at his home outside Louisville. Rebecca told me to go and listen more than I spoke because people who believe they escaped consequences often reveal more than they intend. Daniel's house was a comfortable two-story home with a neat lawn, a basketball hoop over the garage, and an American flag on the porch. It suited him, orderly and disciplined. He hugged Robert, then gave me an awkward side hug that felt like progress. Lily ran to the swing set with neighborhood children, and for the first time in days, I saw her smile. Inside, Evelyn arranged plates as though she owned the house. She told me I looked tired, then pleasantly observed that stress could do that. I smiled and agreed. Dinner began normally. Daniel described his new responsibilities. Robert asked proud questions about his unit, and Evelyn praised Daniel, complimented Robert, and ignored me with practiced precision. Eventually, Daniel said Robert had told him I brought my bronze star to the ceremony and that he regretted not seeing it. Before I could answer, Evelyn said, "That's unfortunate. Things get misplaced." When I asked what she meant, she replied that people should be careful with valuable possessions. It was not sympathy. It was a warning wrapped in polite conversation. She then remarked that military decorations were sentimental, but sentiment did not always equal truth. Robert told her to stop speaking generally, and I said she was not speaking generally at all. Daniel asked what was happening. So I calmly explained that my bronze star had disappeared during his ceremony, and that I was trying to understand how. Evelyn reached for her water, and her hand trembled. Then she laughed too loudly and asked whether I planned to accuse her next. I said I had accused no one. When she demanded to know why I brought it up, I reminded her that she had brought it up first. Daniel slowly put down his fork. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in his face when he looked at his grandmother. The cracks were not forming because I trapped her. They were forming because she could no longer stop defending herself before anyone accused her. A lie carried long enough begins speaking on its own. At Daniel's dinner, I watched more carefully than I ever had before. Evelyn's confidence depended on controlling the emotional temperature of the room. She smiled when everyone was relaxed, made small cutting remarks that could be denied, and relied on Robert to smooth over any discomfort. But once Daniel asked about the medal, she answered too quickly. She knew details no innocent person needed to volunteer, and each attempt to regain control only drew more attention to her. The next morning, Rebecca called just after 8. Margaret had discovered something she overlooked. When Evelyn visited the shop, she had made photocopies of every document before offering an authentication opinion. An hour later, Robert and I sat in Rebecca's office, looking at copies of my deployment orders, witness statements, commendation paperwork, and the handwritten recommendation letter from Colonel Michael Anders. The commander who nominated me after our convoy rescued 3 trapped soldiers during a roadside attack. Seeing the photocopy of Colonel Anders's letter affected me more than seeing the medal might have. His handwriting brought back the heat, dust, confusion, and fear of that convoy mission. It reminded me of the trapped soldiers, the decisions made in seconds, and the people who testified afterward. Evelyn had reduced those memories to objects she could carry into a shop. The copy proved what she had done, but it also reminded me why the original mattered. Then Rebecca showed us Margaret's intake form. It listed Evelyn Whitaker as the customer and described the purpose of the visit as an appraisal of a military medal and accompanying records. The ownership line was blank. Beneath it, Margaret had written, "Customer unable to establish legal ownership. Appraisal declined." Evelyn had effectively admitted the items were not hers. Robert covered his face with both hands and said he did not understand. Rebecca answered gently that he probably did. He simply did not want to. On Monday, we met Margaret at her store. Glass cases displayed old uniforms, flags, medals, and photographs, all treated with quiet respect. She gave us a sealed envelope containing copies of everything Evelyn brought. She had not contacted police earlier because she was uncertain a crime had occurred, but after speaking with Rebecca, she understood the situation. Margaret also produced her business card. On the back, in Evelyn's blue handwriting, were the words, "Please don't mention this visit to my family." Robert stared at it in disbelief. Margaret said Evelyn had seemed nervous. The bell over the shop door rang, and Special Agent David Morales from the Army Criminal Investigation Division entered. He was not there to arrest anyone, but conduct involving stolen military awards, service records, and possible fraudulent claims could have legal consequences. He collected copies of the documents, the intake form, and the card. Then he told me that my patients had allowed them to build a complete timeline. As he sealed the evidence envelope, I realized I no longer cared about revenge. I wanted accountability, and there was a difference. 2 weeks later, Rebecca told us they were ready. The meeting took place not in a courtroom or police station, but in a conference room at the Veterans Resource Center, a place meant to honor service rather than humiliate families. Rebecca, Agent Morales, Margaret, Robert, Daniel, Evelyn, and I attended. Lily remained at school. She had carried enough of the burden. Evelyn arrived in pearls and a navy blazer. She sat beside Robert without looking at me. Agent Morales thanked her for coming voluntarily and placed the photocopied records on the table. The moment she saw them, her confidence cracked. She looked at Robert and said she could explain, but he did not answer. Margaret slid the business card across the table. Evelyn read her own request for secrecy and closed her eyes. Agent Morales calmly explained that they were not accusing her of completing a sale of stolen military property, but the evidence showed she knowingly removed property that did not belong to her. The meeting at the resource center was quiet enough that I could hear paper shifting on the table. No one raised a voice. That made the truth feel heavier. Evelyn had spent years using calmness as power, but now the same calmness belonged to the evidence. She could not dismiss a child as imaginative, a volunteer as mistaken, a colonel as confused, a dealer as unethical, and her own handwriting as coincidence. For once, politeness could not protect her from what she had done. "I wasn't going to sell it," she said. "Then why take it?" I asked. Tears filled her eyes. I hated what it represented. She looked at me and admitted that every time people thanked me for my service, she felt they were forgetting her daughter. She could not stand hearing people call me brave. I told her I had never tried to erase her daughter. Evelyn said she understood that now, but she had been unable to see it before. Robert lowered his head into his hands. He apologized for asking me to ignore years of comments and for excusing his mother's behavior as grief. He said he had never realized she was teaching all of them how to treat me. Then Daniel pushed back his chair, walked around the table, and hugged me. It was not awkward or polite. It was the embrace of family. His voice shook as he apologized for believing things about me that were never true. I reminded him that he had been a child, but he said all of them should have questioned Evelyn sooner. Daniel's apology did not erase the 6 years before it, but it changed what those years would mean going forward. He was not asking me to pretend that nothing happened. He was acknowledging how he had been influenced and choosing differently as an adult. That mattered more than a perfect apology or an instant reconciliation. Trust returned in small actions after that. Phone calls, invitations, questions about my service, and moments when he included Lily and me without hesitation. Agent Morales closed the file and explained that because the property had been recovered and no sale was completed, the matter would remain primarily civil. Accountability had been achieved without destroying what remained of the family. As everyone gathered their things, Evelyn stopped beside me and said she did not expect forgiveness. I told her she would not receive it that day. But if she was truly sorry, she could spend the years she had left honoring her daughter's memory without trying to erase mine. She cried again, and this time I believed the tears were real. Spring arrived quietly. New leaves filled the maple trees outside our house. Lily counted the days until summer vacation, and our home felt peaceful again. Not perfect, but peaceful. Some wounds do not vanish, They simply stopped bleeding. A month after the meeting, Daniel called and asked me to come by on Saturday. When I arrived, Robert was grilling hamburgers while Lily chased bubbles with neighborhood children. Daniel met me on the porch and admitted he had spent years believing family was something people inherited. Now he believed it was something they earned. He reached into his pocket and held out a set of army insignia. He had been promoted again and wanted me to pin them on him. In the army, a promotion pinning is deeply personal. The person who places those insignia on your uniform is someone you choose to honor your journey. I asked whether he was sure. He said he had never been more sure of anything. As I pinned the insignia in place, I remembered the earlier ceremony when Lily squeezed my hand in terror, while everything around us looked perfect. Life looked entirely different now. When I finished, Daniel hugged me. This time he did not call me Claire. "Thanks, Mom." One simple word. 6 years late, and spoken exactly when it mattered most. Robert wiped a tear from his eye, and Lily clapped, announcing that she always knew he would say it someday. We all laughed. A week later, I returned to the Veterans Resource Center, not to file paperwork or recover evidence, but to donate part of my story. I placed certified copies of my service records, photographs, and the commander's recommendation letter in the museum archive. The original remained safe with my family. My bronze star stayed in its blue velvet case inside a small wooden box at home, not because it proved I was brave, but because it reminded me that honor is not something another person can steal. Before leaving, I saw Evelyn arranging chairs for a veterans' luncheon. She had begun volunteering there every week. She walked over and admitted she thought about what she had done every day. She knew she could not change the past, but she wanted to spend whatever time remained doing something worthy of it. I looked around at veterans laughing over coffee, families sharing stories, and young volunteers listening with genuine respect. "That's a good place to start," I told her. As Lily and I walked toward the parking lot, she slipped her hand into mine and said she was glad she had told me the truth. I squeezed the same little hand that had squeezed mine on the day everything changed and told her I was glad too. Children often see what adults overlook. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet voice of an 8-year-old telling the truth while everyone else is looking away. Lily did more than expose a theft. She forced our family to confront years of resentment, manipulation, and silence. She reminded us that honesty can be frightening, forgiveness cannot be demanded, and family is built not by blood alone, but by the courage to tell the truth, accept responsibility, and change. If this story touched your heart, remember the people who have shown quiet courage in your life. Share it with someone who still believes honesty, family, redemption, and forgiveness matter. And if you would like to hear more stories about resilience and the strength found in ordinary people, we would be honored to have you join us again.